Welcome to DeFi by Design, where we talk all things blockchain and cryptocurrency while striving to educate, empower, and enrich.
It's your boy Andy, and welcome back to the DeFi Slate YouTube channel. Smash the like button on this video, that really helps us out, and sit back and enjoy the content. Thank you very much.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the DeFi by Design podcast, here today with episode 85 in the midst of a DeFi bear market and what feels like the macro environment just coming down on us. But what's most exciting is we are still here and still creating and talking about DeFi and trying to get in on what's going on in the ecosystem and kind of the impressive innovations that are happening. I'm here, of course, with Rob as well. Rob and I have been heads down doing just all different types of projects, still doing content, trying to trade a little bit, just doing a good bit of stuff. So yeah, Rob, how you doing today? Happy Friday. And excited to talk about the development of a new alternative layer one here today.
Yeah. Good morning and hello. It's another beautiful day in Florida. It's definitely great to have the opportunity to chat with Evan and 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵, co-founders of Mysten Labs and really pioneers of some new blockchain technology. Like Andy said, we are building through this bear market, meaning we're just learning as much as we can, testing out, experimenting with some of the new technologies that are available as a result of all the great work that engineers have done in the space so far. And the Mysten Labs and 𝗠 blockchain is no different. So I'm really excited to dive in to what makes 𝗠 different and what new levels and opportunities this technology will bring us. I'll pass it over to our esteemed guests. 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵, do you want to start? Introduce yourself, kind of how you got started in blockchain technology and your journey that led you to Mysten Labs.
Sure thing. Hey, everybody. My name's 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵. I'm one of the co-founders of Mysten Labs, along with Evan. Actually spent the last decade of my career in crypto. I got involved in Bitcoin in 2011 and started building the space in 2012. But my last stint in the crypto space was actually at Facebook. Spent the last 2.5 years of my career working with Evan and the team in the advanced R&D portion of Facebook on the 𝗵𝗶𝗴 project, trying to get 𝗵𝗶𝗴 out the door. I worked as a lead PM there, working all the R&D work we did in addition to, custody and other interesting projects at Facebook. Prior to that, I was lead PM at both VMware and Oracle to launch enterprise blockchain. And again, before that, I was building my own startups in the crypto space, namely in Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. Started off my career as a software engineer and slowly progressed into product management as well through the process.
Sweet. And Evan, I assume you come from a technical background as well.
Yeah. I'm Evan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mysten Labs. So yeah, I've been in tech for 26 years now. So all the gray hair shows. Was a software engineer. Actually, was a very good one. So 2012 ACN Software System Award winner for my work on 𝗹𝗶 and related technologies. So kind of move into sort of more team building kind of role over the years, but my passions really has always been on cutting edge technology. So yeah, I spent before Mysten, I spent the last 3.5 years kind of leading the 𝗵𝗶𝗶 efforts there, a couple of areas, developer platform and then research, ultimately combined into one team called 𝗵𝗶𝗶 Research, right? So pretty much a lot of the core innovation in the DM blockchain, a lot of them came from my team. So the entire Move platform, our co-founder, CTO, Sam, is the leader, the designer of the Move language. He had a team to work on formal verification, everything, the entire stack. And beyond that, right, we had Dahlia, Maki, Georgia Dennesis, who's also another one of our co-founder, leading a lot of effort on the sort of the future of consensus and the system design. Costas is our chief cryptographer who is leading everything related to cryptography. So we had a great team, built a lot of cool stuff. So very, very excited. After 2.5 years there on the V team, we just decided it's time to, do our own thing and move a little faster and be even more ambitious than what we set out to build at Facebook.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's there's quite obviously a massive broad market for kind of this ability for teams and applications to come and build on a layer that has the trustlessness and the speeds and kind of the efficiencies that a lot of these project builders kind of want. There's definitely a lot of blockchains to choose from, and different kind of philosophies for each one. But I think now we're starting to see some of these more robust and sustained chains kind of keep a lot of users, where some of like the newer ones have kind of started to like phase off a bit in terms of like, I guess, hype and overall kind of like excitement. So I guess let's kick off with kind of what do you guys see as being like the ideal kind of technology for a layer one or for an app layer? Is there a way to kind of solve the trilemma that you guys have thought through, or kind of what's been your perspective for the ideal kind of outline or tech for this layer one?
Yeah, so we take a somewhat different view, right? So if you think about sort of what's been happening, look at what has been happening in the space for the last few years. There's a lot of focus on addressing the shortcomings of existing blockchain technology, existing layer one, but each of them is sort of doing a piece by piece, right? Addressing one problem at a time, right? Using rollout to address sort of the throughput concerns, right? There's some newer smart contract languages being developed that will be better than Solidity, which is, to be frank, not a high bar to cross. But I think a lot of what our view is, solving each one of those problem piecemeal, actually creates different sets of trade-off, put it that way, right? So there's a lot of focus on modular blockchains and all that. And there's a lot of great ideas by themselves, right? But you have to also think about from the product builder perspective. It's hard enough to build on blockchains. It is very, very daunting for people who are outside, who are not crypto native and outside the blockchain space to come in and say, hey, how do I do this, use this technology to address the problems I'm seeing in engaging with my customers, right, in growing the business. Then now you're adding another layers, a few more choices to them, for them that's, in our opinion, not the right way to solve problems. The trade-off is too steep, right? And also, a lot of these technologies will have kind of other problems, right? Other challenges introduced, right? For example, protocol sharding, right, will improve throughput, but it breaks atomic composability, right? And guess what, right? We've been talking about composable, everything composable. It's not, right? We haven't demonstrated that, and you're breaking it even further, right? Smart contract is hard enough now. If you are building a protocol sharding system, now you have to have the developer be aware how to write, concurrent programs, right? It's nuts, right? If you think the current, it's hard enough now, think about what those solutions add to the problem. So that's why when we came out, we wanted to take some time because we've been thinking about how to more fundamentally solve the problem from a total design perspective, right? It's not one thing. We want to solve everything, right? What are those things we want to solve? Yes, we want to solve scalability problem, but what sort of way to solve scalability problem, and what does that look like, right? So, if you, again, coming from the product developer perspective, just saying you have a roadmap to solve scalability is not going to be good enough, right? What people want to know is now and the future. They want to have predictability in the cost. They want to know if they keep on growing their product, right? The underlying infrastructure can keep up with it, right? And that is not true if you are struggling today to provide the block space to the developers and and you cannot control costs because you don't have a local fee market, right? And you have this kind of noisy neighbor problem. Some airdrop happening, and all of a sudden my product I have to pay 10x, or I have to pass the cost down to my consumer, right? That's a non-starter. Or well, wait a year or so when we are finishing this, then you have like, you know, a few X of kind of TPS than we have now. Well, so guess what? You know, 10 months from now, my business already collapsed and die because people cannot use my product, right? You need to get to a system, a design that allow you to have this elasticity, meaning increased demand means increased supply, right? Ultimately, you need to be able to deal with this IP nature of demands, right? Which we're seeing over and over again in large scale product, right? More people using it, you have more machines to supply capacity, right? So that is one fundamental design criteria for us is scalability and scalability on demand, right? Elasticity. Two, well, let's talk about things like, you know, composability, right? But guess what? The assets today are not composable, right? Think about an NFT. A Bored Ape is a Bored Ape. It's got some bytes inside a smart contract that say it has a map say this is your Bored Ape. This Bored Ape belongs to the address, right? It's trapped inside a smart contract, right? You cannot say that asset can be composed with a certain asset and automatically, boom, you have a magical new asset, right? That's a mutant Bored Ape, right? This is obviously not a real example, but hopefully you understand the point, right? You want to be able to say, I have an asset that represents, let's say, a hero in my game. I have another asset that's this sword, right? And I want to combine them and say, now the hero has a sword. Well, think about that, right? You have want to design a system that can do this arbitrarily, right? Because in the real world, you don't know how things are going to be composed upfront. You cannot possibly program every permutation of that ahead of time. So you need to have a fundamental system that can represent assets as arbitrary things and compose them together. And you want the asset to be live and can be updated. That sword better not be any generic sword, because that's what right now the NFT standard doesn't allow you to keep anything that on chain, doesn't allow you to mutate them. Instead, what I want is some asset that capture the lore, right? If I am in some game, you know, right, that sword has been used multiple times to kill monsters and bosses and all that. That better be, the history better be on chain and better be part of my asset. Because then when I transfer the asset to another, you know, to another user, it has meanings. It's not just another instance of it, right? This is the one that killed the boss, and it's being willed by this hero who, you know, a legendary, you know, esport person, right? So composability, the ability to represent assets, arbitrary asset in a way that doesn't have all the limitations. Then you start thinking about, okay, well, what is the programming model? What is the developer experience? How do you deal with safety and security issues, right? You know, that's what the basis of what we have done over the years and move. And we're just taking a step further because now you have a smart contract system that allow you to, you know, because the underlying system allow you to represent assets, objects, right? Now you have objects as input to a smart contract that produce objects or mutate object, and that can be input to another smart contract, right? You're chaining all these protocols together, smart contract together. That's composability at a, you know, protocol level. Then you have composability at the asset level, right? So it's all these things together and have the best in class in terms of latency and finality and all that. The ability to store things on chain, right? The ability to mutate things on chain, better language, everything, right? So we want to build that, right? We're not really that interested in incremental changes. We're not really interested in fixing one problem at a time, because we invest in a world where every product out there can just say, hey, I want to start changing my product in a way so the end user have a bit more ownership in the platform, right? They rather than they're using a product that's built on top of a centralized trust. They want to have a product that's built on decentralized trust, right? It doesn't require them to change everything, but gradually decentralize a product, giving away some ownership, control the assets to another. to the users. And that's what we believe is going to get us to this magical world of mass adoption where the entire industry just become more real and bigger, right? So that's what we're going for. So hopefully that
that's awesome.
To your question, but that's our philosophy.
And before I get too giddy on just trying to ask the next 10,000 questions about Move and kind of how and the technicals, just kind of giving our listeners a recap here. So as far as the scalability kind of front goes, the design of a blockchain to basically be able to match the performance in terms of fees and kind of like uptime and just overall usability with the demand at certain times to make it more of a, like you say, elastic kind of curve, because there's not always, a high level of demand. Like Ethereum gas is not always, 100, 200 𝗋. In fact, over the last couple months, it's been in the tens, right? So but there was times in 2021 where it was in the 200s for, a week straight. So kind of being able to have this more, I guess, demand-based block space price kind of system there allows for greater scalability. And then on top of that, this kind of level of composability with basically taking what we know in the Ethereum space and in the EVM as ERC20s or 721s, and basically making new versions of these based on different activities that have happened on chain, which then allows a whole different array of applications. Like you hit on the gaming front. I mean, you can go for things like the real estate market or retail sales, even kind of with things like this, goods in the real world and in the digital world. So kind of bringing that piece together as well builds the system. Now, you guys are doing this because of the programming language Move, which you have mentioned snarkily that it is much better than the Solidity language. So kind of on a broad technical scale, would like to kind of understand some key differences and why those are important. So either one.
Yeah, so I think Move is designed, we view, first you have to understand what this is for, right? So we established the blockchain is basically an kind of infrastructure that allow, anybody, products to, create assets or represent real world assets in a digital way, right? So it's all about manipulation of assets, transfer asset, combine assets, right? Program against assets. That's where the smart contract language come into the play, right? So you need to have assets, and the smart contract, that's the magic you can allow you to do away with middlemen, right? Having a decentralized database is one thing, right? Having the programmability is what the magic is to allow the product to fundamentally eliminate all this inefficiency that require the centralized entity to provide the trust and, be the middleman, right? The rent-seeking behaviors all come from that. So that's the establish. Once you establish that, then you realize the program language has to have this assets as a first cost concept, right? And without that, you don't have this way to enforce ownership, to have access control, and the expressiveness of the language. So that's the fundamental kind of things here that's very, very important to point out. Those are the key design point here for Move, right? Assets is first class, access control building, and the ability to represent resources and rules and everything is what make it significantly different, right? So everything else, and then one may ask, well, why not use existing conventional language? Yes, right? You can bake that concept, right, through some libraries, say on top of Rust and all that, say here's what represent assets and all that, but then you have to add with things like instrumentation, right? You have to change things to constrain your language because it's not a general purpose language. It's all about dealing with assets, right? So that's why we took the route of building design the language from the ground up. Our CTO Sam has had a podcast, go into much more depth about the evolution, the design, the thinking beyond it, behind it. Yeah, but that's the sort of the high level.
Gotcha. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely put that link in the description there and kind of explore that. Sometimes it gets too technical, but it's always nice to kind of touch on those fronts. And another kind of pressing thing that comes to top of mind. Yeah, go ahead.
Add that in addition to the stellar work that Simon and the team has done on Move, we also feel like it's more of a natural transition for a traditional Web 2 programmer to come in and actually build in Web 3, right? You don't have to learn all the relative safety issues of or the safety concept of the platform. You don't need to be, just like with Solidity, there's a lot of quirks about it that you need to know as a developer to be able to get the best out of it. And specifically, if we think about the amount of bugs and errors, right, that I feel is a big inhibitor of like growth in the space or even adoption. Like just having $100 million hacks on a regular basis is not going to set the world on fire in terms of like thinking blockchain is the coolest thing, right? So taking away some of the boiler code that people have to write for safety just to do a basic transfer, that's handled by the Move virtual machine directly. So if I transfer an asset from person A to person B, if I want to make my own version of an asset, the element of transfer, burn, and all the cool stuff that you want to do around asset, making sure an asset is rare but also is limited in issuance, that is handled fundamentally by the native Move virtual machine, and it's not something you need to program as a smart contract developer.
Yeah.
You compare that to, go on, Evan, you might.
Yeah, I mean, I can touch on this a little bit, right? So fundamentally is making sure the digital assets behave like real world physical ones, right? Physical asset, you cannot just create out of thin air, right? You cannot double spend, you cannot destroy it just by accident, right? You cannot duplicate, double spend, and destruction, right? That's three of the very, very fundamental characteristic, right, of any kind of asset, right? So the language, the type system enforce this. So it's taking away all those common mistakes you would make otherwise, right? So that's the magic of Move. That's what Edini is referring to.
Yeah, in addition to being like an object based, so the data model on Sui is actually object based, and that transcends into the programming language itself. Everything in Move, in the Sui version of Move, is object based. So we feel that's very natural in terms of how people will think, especially if you're coming from a traditional OO programming language. You'll be able to grasp the concepts of Sui Move very, very quickly.
On the progression of Web 2 to Web 3 that you mentioned, the progression kind of from existing Web 3 applications to like this new era of token. Could you describe the progression from the inside of Facebook and how the 𝗵𝗶𝗶 project kind of took a Web 2 company and started to break into Web 3? Could you kind of just describe your journey and what learnings did you take from your time at Facebook and implement into Sui and Mysten Labs?
Right. No, I can speak to this, right? So, Facebook, recognize, right? Their product has one limitation, right? And that is the product has been successful in a lot of the communication, the community problems, right? Getting people together, communicate efficiently. But taking that next step further is to allow them to transfer money as seamlessly as any data, right? Message is a data, piece of data, right? It's you type something in the Messenger app and the other side receive it immediately. All of a sudden they don't, they have this tool, they don't have to pay money to pick up a phone and pay for it, right? That's powerful. But whenever you want to do payments, transfer money, right? Cross-border payments, remittance is big concern, right? Because that's a lot of those people rely on WhatsApp and Messenger to communicate with their family back home. Why wouldn't they want to have that next step, that's remittance, to be as seamless as that, right? So that's sort of the genesis of the idea behind 𝗵𝗶𝗶 in the first place, right? That is to make money transfer to be as easy, as seamless as data transfer, right? So what did we learn from that? Well, so first of all, we learned a lot about what that can enable, right? We learned a lot, just thinking, working through the people in the remittance space, we working with people in the financial inclusion space, right? We realize how big opportunity is, how much benefit that can bring to the world. We also obviously learned a lot about the what not to do and how to engage with regulators and lawmakers and all that. But I think the biggest takeaway for us was we can take that concept and generalize it further, broaden it further. Why make money a special case, right? Money is just one particular example of an asset, right? If you generalize that vision to make any kind of asset transfer as easy as it can be, then again, coming back to making it programmable, right? And that's when the magic happens, right? Now you're thinking about how the product interaction model will change as a result. And that's when your eyes light up and you realize that's the opportunity here, right? It's just using a contrived example. This is not happening. This is, I'm just like simplifying for the sake of, giving you example, right? Everybody talk about the creative economy, the trend, the move to solo entrepreneur, right? People don't want to work for a company. They want to produce things, then monetize the product they produce, but they are relying on a platform to bring customer to them for the discovery problem. Now, what they do is they right now have to trust a centralized entity, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all that, right? You give your asset, you give away the asset, the control of the asset to the centralized entity. They make the money, then give you a cut in return, right? You see the problem here. You lost the control. You don't know how it's going to be used. You don't have any kind of transparency how they're being monetized. Are you being paid fairly, right? Now imagine the model where it's more collaborative between the producer, the consumer, and the platform. I retain control of my asset because it's on this open, trusted, platform, right? Where, the trust is distributed, right? It's not owned by controlled by a single entity, right? Now I retain control of my assets. The platform, TikTok, Instagram of the world, the future version of them, they say, my job is not to take your asset into a black box control. You retain control. You give me permission to bring you customers, right? I can display for you, right? I help you with the discovery thing. Monetization goes directly between consumers, go from the consumer to the producer. They get a cut, right? So that changed the model. And the magic there is, first, decentralized the trust aspect. Secondly, using these programs, smart contract, to do away with a lot of these, unnecessary kind of, inefficiency in the middle. Right? Because
I'll say even further from that, right? Like because you now decentralized trust and you've increased efficiency significantly, what you then gain is the ability to access broader markets, right? Namely, you can go into regions that you originally could not access, either for whether it's a regulatory reason or maybe the price barriers or even competitive barriers that prohibit you from entering. And now you can offer assets or digital assets to those who are unbanked or underbanked significantly, right? So you can, if anything, broaden the appeal of your platform and enable more people to have access, right? So that's very akin to the Facebook mission of like literally, empowering and reaching as many people as possible with a platform to give them a lot of value, whether it's communication, building communities and everything of that nature. So we think that is a great mission. And we think, namely what we're trying to do as 𝗬 with a 𝗬 platform is we think we can unlock that world for many institutions, if not, small builders all the way to the mid builders as well. So if you want to build content, you want to create content, you want to own content, you can use 𝗬 as a platform for online doing that. And then you can reach, you can basically partner with the likes of Facebook or partner with the likes of other platforms who have a broader reach to sell your content. But if anything, having that control actually gives a lot more flexibility to you as a creator, where you don't now have to trust a central entity. You can take your content to where it's most respected or where it generates the most amount of eyeballs. So that power shift, it's really transferring power from centralized entities now to individuals, which actually is a great thing. And I think, if anything, creates greater efficiencies for commerce to happen.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's one thing that we touch on a lot here on DeFi Slate Show, is just kind of this idea of banking the unbanked. I feel like last couple of years we've kind of strayed away almost in terms of DeFi. It's just kind of gotten away from the mission a little bit, but I think like it's project like what you guys are working on, and times like such where, you know, you start to realize the broader importance of, like Evan was saying in his example, just a simple way for payments to be as streamlined as, you know, texting or WhatsApp is, right? And things like this then translate to people and businesses like Rob and I's here, who are creating content, putting things out there, educating, right? And we are, you know, beholden to Twitter, and we actually got off Substack and have our own website, so we, you know, took that leap. But there's a certain threshold that you can hit, right? But you still can't get away from the I guess like the monopoly of the social media world, as well as just kind of everything in that realm that controls and owns the IPs, and these things. So it's definitely refreshing to hear the mission again, especially, you know, during these times. It's definitely inspiring for those who are listening as well, you know, to kind of get involved with a project, you know, specifically in these niches, because those are two probably of the most, I would say, like easy ways for crypto to make an impact and blockchain to make an impact on the world, like as soon as this year. Like those are huge and easy. And so yeah, I'm glad that you guys are tackling them. And
I mean,
yeah,
if I could just even jump in, right? Like you mentioned DeFi, which is very interesting to us, right? Like we are big fans of DeFi. And the only problem we feel right now with DeFi is it only reaches a small percentage or portion or sliver of like the economy, right? Not everyone has assets in the first place. So if you're doing collateralized lending, well, people generally don't have the typical collateral. Like they might not have Bitcoin, they might not have Ethereum, they might not have some other asset to onboard, right? But if you build a platform that allows them to build value and actually give access to that, like let's say, for example, tomorrow it might be something to do with my on-chain identity. It could also be the fact that I'm generating income streams from social that I'm doing on-chain. Like I'm generating posts on-chain directly on 𝗬, and I'm monetizing those posts directly, and I can read that history of how I'm generating income and actually turn that income stream into something that's collateralized. Well, now you've given someone access to credit that was never enabled credit in the first place. I think another impediment to the growth is the fact that most of these things happen off-chain. You have a lot happening off-chain that are locked in Web 2 world. And I'm not saying Web 2 is bad. Web 2 is great. There are times where, you know, Web 2 is needed and times where I think Web 3 is the way to go. But I think if you can enable or at least have more bandwidth to allow more interactions on chain, then you can build smart contracts around those on-chain engagements to actually drive more value for the end user. And so I think there's an element of like unlocking new possibilities that were previously impossible as well, which is why we think when you talk about bringing next billion people into crypto, it's not about just saying DeFi. It's about unlocking stuff that were pretty much tied in, you know, like, for example, game assets are normally locked in a Web 2 server, right? They're stuck in AWS and Google. Now you can take those game assets, move them off AWS and GCP, put them on 𝗬 directly, and have the lore and the history. Now you've unlocked new possibilities for people to monetize beyond what was in the game. And similarly, you start on 𝗬, you can store tweets directly on chain. You know, rather than having a thread store on Twitter's server, store on the blockchain, and now you can start to generate new forms of businesses as a result. So there's an element of like turning assets that are previously on Web 2 services directly on Web 3, and then generating new forms of businesses, which we want to empower. We don't know all the possibilities of what people can build, but that's why we're here, to build that platform and to make it easy for developers to build.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely that element of like, that's bringing, you could even call them, I guess just assets, like whether it's tweets, videos, jobs, just anything that is basically creates value and stores value. And when you frame it in the sense of like, rather than trying to bring, I guess, the value that already exists in the DeFi or the Web3 world, but rather why focus on that than focus on the value that already exists in the real world, because it's so much larger. And so yeah, just bringing that in, making it easy for, you know, different creators or different types of businesses to kind of come in. And I mean, like you say, like DeFi is kind of a niche, like basically whales gambling casino. I mean, that's effectively what it has been. Now, bringing in the ability for anybody across the world to kind of have access to different toolings or just a broader system of commerce really obviously changes the game for a lot of people who just need an internet kind of, you know, just a little bit of Wi-Fi and some, you know, ambition to kind of create something. So yeah, I'd like to touch on your efforts on kind of bringing in Web 2 or traditional devs into your project or kind of into the crypto space. How has that gone? What does that kind of learning process look like? I know we touched on it a bit, Evan, with the Facebook kind of turnover, but are you guys seeing a demand for Web 2 or traditional devs to come in? What does that look like from your end? Are you hiring? Yeah.
Evan, do you want to go or should I jump in? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is a thing. I mean, there's a lot of noise always made around being late to the market, and the Web3. It's a big gap to grab existing Web3 devs, but the reality is that just not a lot of builders of Web3 anyway, right? It's a small market. Facebook, for example, has tens of thousands of engineers. I mean, one project in Facebook probably has more engineers than there are in the Web3 entirely. So the market it's still early days. There's still a lot of opportunities to educate the people in Web3 in Web2 to bring them into Web3, which is why we built a language that's actually very intelligible for someone in Web2 to understand. Now, to the end of who we bringing into building, we have people all over. We have a lot of people who are already building in the likes of Solana or building in the ETH ecosystem that are now bringing projects or building new projects or innovating new projects directly on 𝗰, because there are new unlocked opportunities that 𝗰 just makes possible that they weren't able to tackle on previous platforms. And they're now trying to engage and bring that to market on 𝗰, which is very exciting for us. Separately, we're working with traditional Web2 companies too. I mean, we are working, it was announced we're working with Netmarble. There are other large institutions that are going to be bringing games, if anything, AAA games, who already have tens of millions of users directly onto 𝗰. Why? Because one, their assets can go from AWS now to 𝗰, but more importantly, now you have tens of millions of users who are playing games who now have a frictionless way to have ownership of their assets without a very complex user onboarding process that Web3 normally challenges you with. So it's actually quite broad, but we think the biggest opportunity is actually in bringing the traditional Web2 devs who are now thinking, what are the new businesses are possible with distributed ledger technology, and can now see 𝗰 as a potential opportunity where they can maybe realize that, where it wasn't possible. I mean, look, it's before, we're talking about 56K modems, right? And what did we have then? We had Google, we had very basic websites, that was great. But then when broadband came, we had Netflix and we had all these wonderful things that just weren't possible before. And that's the same analogy we're trying to draw with 𝗰. Namely, we are on the 56K dial-up modem stage with blockchains. And now we want a blockchain that enables broadband, so namely new types of applications that have high throughput, that have high demand for high throughput, low latency, but actually need on-chain storage as well to build more richer applications that are more engaging for consumers. So in terms of, the TLDR is we're working with both Web3 and Web2 builders, but we find that there's a lot more promise in the Web2 space because that market is significantly larger than what we have today. It's about broadening the pie, not trying to fight for the same pie that everyone else is fighting for.
Yeah, I think the one thing to add to this, right? A lot of people tend to think Web3 products are different from Web2 product, right? What you really think about it is like, how do you use this decentralized technology to change aspects of the product, right? There's no such thing as a pure Web3 product, right? There's your front end, it's still probably running on AWS or something, right? And there's elements of your applications that fits better with the existing technology, right? What we're talking about ultimately is the asset, the ownership, right? That is the most important one. If you can decentralize that and give it the control back to the consumers, right? You have accomplished a lot. Fundamentally, that doesn't matter if it's a Web2 product, it's a Web3 product. It's just a product that benefits users. So that is the key thing that I think is going to, we're focusing a lot. That's why we're focusing a lot on solving product level problems, right? You can't just keep on jumping up and down and say, well, decentralization is great, ownership's, so ownership of assets is great, right? You also have to think about the product point of view, right? What do the product builder cares about? Well, they care about acquiring customers, right? They think about engaging the customer, turning the customer into paying customer, right? They think about retention, engagement, conversion, all those things, right? You got to build a technology that allow them to solve those problems. So then they will be excited about improving upon the product using decentralized technology, right? If you're forcing them to say, well, you're going to have to dumb down or introduce a whole bunch of friction to the product, because now your consumer have to deal with paying fees in crypto. Think about it, or getting airdrop of NFTs before they can jump in and play a game. You are only building product for a relatively smaller audience, right? Maybe that's required at this stage as you learn and experiment to see what would work. That's absolutely cool. We actually would love to support these projects, want to work with them. But let's also always think about what else we need to do to blur the line between Web 2 and Web 3 and just make it exceptional product experience that benefit users. Right, so that that's what in our belief is what Web3 really is about. Is not about this technology. It's about the product and the consumer relationship. Right. Once we're seeing that change, then Web3 is real. Right. Now you're seeing more start going that direction. Then that's real.
Yeah, and then there becomes like a native demand for usage of the technology, because like right now I feel like there's a bit of a screaming into a dark hole in a sense. Like we're kind of yelling at everybody. Like, I mean, first it was the Bitcoiners, like, guys, libertarians, like the government's corrupt, like the it's not going to work. And I mean, we're seeing now, and we'll see in the coming years how the central bankers, play their systems, and we'll probably look back and be like, those guys were crazy, but right. And then we kind of got to Ethereum and kind of Web3 now, where like NFTs and DAOs and kind of like just yelling, but like there's not a lot of reason per se necessarily for somebody to jump in. But like when there's a application or a layer of applications like 𝗠 or like a opportunistic kind of environment for somebody to either be a creator or run a business or kind of do their marketing or do their whatever it is on a business or a culture sense, then it's like the marketing goes from like screaming to nobody to like almost the product and the environment almost does it for you. So I mean, that's kind of, there's probably going to be like that tectonic shift, like you're saying, where we blur the lines, but also where the demand for using Web3 just outweighs any cons or any kind of other, I guess, factors that people may kind of contribute to their current processes, whether it be in a business sense or a culture sense, a money sense, a communication content, right? We've discussed quite a few, and I mean, that's kind of the future of where we're headed, and it's obviously exciting. And I'm kind of curious as we wrap up here, what you guys are pushing forward next couple of months to the next like kind of 6 months or so. What's the roadmap look like? What are you guys most excited about there? And
Yeah, I mean, we're looking forward to launching our testnet. I mean, our DevNet has been running for quite a while now, and we're gearing up to launch our testnet within a month. And the next step after testnet, there'll be a few phases of testnet to harden the system even further. And we are planning to do mainnet right after. So the goal right now is keep building the ecosystem, working with a lot of the builders who are working to launch AMMs directly on 𝗠, do airdrops, do the building games, actual on-chain games, off-chain games, in addition to like storing rich content directly on 𝗠. Those assets we want to have on day one for mainnet, and they're all building right now. And our main focus right now is really building a platform and strengthening the platform to get it ready for mainnet.
Awesome. And can our community get involved on testnet, whether it be users, devs? Just jump in the Discord and kind of check it out.
Absolutely. We welcome everybody to join our Discord channel. There's a lot. I mean, you find I'm always on there. Sam's always on there, our CTO. A lot of our team is always on Discord, engaging with the community, answering questions. So jump on the Discord. You can download the code and start building. If you go to 𝗠.io right now, you can actually download the SDK and start playing on testnet, get some test coins. On DevNet, and start getting some test coins and start building right away. But more importantly, there are a lot of code samples. If you want to write AMMs, if you want to write any form of NFT, we have a lot of those samples already to start building. And there are already a lot of apps you can start engaging with. There's also a slew of wallets. There's, Easy Wallet is going to be launching. There is, of course, the 𝗠 wallet. There's 𝗠 as well. And, there's also, Ethos wallet as well that you can download and start playing with. So the ecosystem's already building very, very quickly, and we have a lot of engagement. So we'd love to have any of your followers who want to participate, jump on Discord and start participating.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add to that saying, just education, right? I mean, as we indicated earlier, right, our thinking is somewhat different. We design a blockchain, the design, the technology is also very different. So a lot of the concept are probably quite different, right? It's like, for example, on Sui, basically every asset is, kind of NFT. Basically, it's an object you can define whatever it look like, right? So there's a lot of things to learn, right? I think I'll urge the listener, the viewers, to say, hey, let's have a fresh mindset. Let's learn. Let's read into this, right? Because a lot of time in this space, it's just so much noise, and people sort of like kind of read the headlines only and sort of like try to jump into it and just say, okay, make some assumptions like this is, this, right? This is a move chain. Well, guess what? It's not just a move, right? It's the entire design of the architecture is completely different, and why we're doing it, right? So I love to, we need to do a better job, and we'll continue to educate everyone, the public, about what the future of the technology should look like.
Beautiful. And one thing that we ask most every guest, and we'll ask you individually, is if you had to pitch and explain 𝗲 and Mysten Labs to anybody in the world, who would it be, and why would you pick this person, or what would you say to them? And I'll give you a minute here to kind of.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the person. If I were to pitch that person, the criteria would be they are a decision maker for some major properties that a lot of product that a lot of people, millions and millions, or even tens or hundreds of millions people benefit from, and they already seeing the community are asking for some changes, right? So I would say at this point, I'll pitch to whoever's in charge of Fortnite. Right, and say, hey, what if you can think about decentralize or giving away control of the assets in the game in a very, very subtle way, right? We're not asking you to change everything. Fortnite is an incredibly successful product as it is. But what if you listen to the demand of the user? They say, well, I want to have the skins or whatever the assets I own in this universe to have meanings outside the universe, right? Even as basic as, maybe some kind of way to show off my assets outside the game. Or I want to capture the moment that happened in a gameplay session as a memorabilia and share with my friends that participate in the event. And I want to display that. And it's not just going to be a still picture, it's going to have a whole bunch of lores and information around it, about it, and it's going to continue to change, right? So, that will be my choice right now.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it would be someone who's running relatively successful social media companies. We can think of many. I mean, there's a reason why I think creators are going to be the ones who are the segment that gains some of the most in this ecosystem. Namely, the power is going to them, unlike the third-party networks that exist today. I'll be pitching to them the idea of like enabling direct publishing for creators and liberating the assets that they create and keeping them under control. For example, every tweet that I make should go on chain, and I can take that tweet can be displayed on Facebook. It can be displayed on Discord. It can be displayed anywhere I want. It's my choice, right? And anything I create, namely any picture I create on platform, it's directly on chain, and I can choose to display that anywhere I want, and I can monetize that accordingly depending on the platform that I choose. So if people are viewing it on Facebook, I make money. If people are viewing it on Instagram and engaging with it on Instagram, I get a share of the revenues on the ad revenues, right? I think that collaboration would actually make platforms more true to how they monetize. Namely, it will be more about what value can I drive to these creators for the assets that they build, and giving ownership directly to those creators accordingly. So I think if I had to pitch anybody, it would be major CEOs or decision makers of social media companies, and in getting them to think about liberating created content onto decentralized blockchains and giving that power back to consumers.
Yeah, I'll cheat. I would say I heard Twitter is maybe undergoing management change, right? So I'd love to have that social graph in mind, be co-owned by the people who are part of that social graph.
Yes.
So the graph have meanings and utility outside the Twitter app will be amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, guys, thanks a lot for coming on, kind of sharing the vision, explaining the tech side as well, answering some of our questions. We are always excited to be chatting about this technology, learning, and kind of just helping our community get a feel for what's coming. So excited to get on the testnet and try some things out and see how things run, and excited to get our community involved as well. So thanks, guys, and have a great weekend.